I think the definition of maturity really is quite simple, and I'd say it's the difference between how a child behaves and how an adult behaves. The less childlike you are, the more mature you will be. And I think what's lost on most people, however, are the why and the how. Namely, why is it so important to be mature, and how do you put that into practice? So, starting with the former, I can think of a number of reasons why it's so important to be mature. Number one, it gets you far more respect because it's worthy of so much more admiration. It's much harder to be mature than it is to be immature, because if you're being immature, then you're just relying on your primitive instincts. It doesn't take any work, and it's very easy. It also makes you more attractive because any potential romantic partner of yours is going to see themselves more so as your babysitter than anything else if you are immature, because that indicates a lot of negative things about your personality, which we'll talk more about in the second half. But above all else, as I always say, you have to decide what kind of a person you want to be. And I think most of us, knowing that being mature is traditionally respected and admired, want to claim that that's the kind of person that we are without actually putting the work in to be that kind of person. So if you want the recognition that comes with it, then you have to actually put the work in to be a mature person. Now, when you start to look at how to be mature, I'd say there are at least three very important things that you have to do. And they are exercising emotional restraint, showing that you have experience, and showing that you have awareness. So taking those one at a time, what is emotional restraint? That's where whenever you feel an emotion, especially a negative emotion such as frustration or anger, you don't just immediately express that by throwing a temper tantrum or crying in front of everybody, because that's exactly what children do, for at least two reasons. For one, it's almost like this survival mechanism that's hardwired into us, where we figured out that if we scream as a baby, that's going to get us what we want, essentially by stressing out those around us so that they feel compelled to do that. But also, at that stage in our lives, we haven't learned how to communicate with anything besides emotions. So we don't know how to communicate with body language or advanced vocabulary or something. So you've got to do the opposite to indicate maturity. So whenever you experience a negative emotion, you have to wait until the right time and place to express that emotion if you can't control it. But also take a look around you and notice that nobody else in the room is erupting with anger or frustration. And that's because everybody else is also going through something. They just have the maturity and the restraint to not express those emotions. So you don't really have an excuse in that case to kind of hog the spotlight and be selfish in that way. But also in life, you will always be faced with stressful obligations and hardships and obstacles. And instead of crying or complaining or throwing your hands in the air and giving up, you've got to toughen up and step up to the plate and do what's expected of you. Do your due diligence with a little bit of honor and nobility instead of just selfishness. Now, experience is also another very powerful indicator of maturity, because quite obviously, as children, we don't have any life experience. So step one is, of course, to get experience, and don't just be a passive bystander in those experiences, and instead immerse yourself in them and analyze them so you actually get something out of it. But also show that you have those experiences. And one of the ways you can do that is by not overreacting whenever you come across something familiar in the future, especially an experience that you might think is intimidating or unfavorable somehow. So instead of panicking or jumping out of your seat, do the best you can to stay calm and collected in whatever situation you find yourself in. So we talked about attraction earlier. That's actually a great example of how maturity that's inspired by experience works heavily in your favor. So if ever you're attracted to somebody and you overreact, such as by getting really nervous in a conversation with them or drastically altering your behavior to desperately get their attention or something like that, then what does that say about you? That you probably don't have a whole lot of experience dating other people to know that you have an abundance of options and knowing that it's really not that big of a deal and it's going to be okay. You probably don't have a whole lot of experience even making conversation with strangers for that matter. And people are just going to jump to the worst possible conclusion, which is that there's probably something wrong with you where you weren't able to get that experience. So instead, you have to show that you know what you're doing. So stay calm and collected, like I said, and try treating that person just like anybody else rather than someone special or putting them up on a pedestal. And last but not least, show that you have awareness of both yourself and others, as well as just life in general. So take care of your appearance and observe how what you say and do impacts those around you instead of just being oblivious. Show that you know what's socially acceptable versus unacceptable by calibrating the voice, the volume of your voice to your surroundings, for example, or dressing properly for the occasion, knowing when and where to tell jokes versus being serious, listening more than you talk and being inquisitive rather than just being so inwardly focused. And again, show that you know how life works. So show that you know you have obligations like getting an education, holding down a job, and that you know difficult things in life are going to happen, like I said earlier, but instead of being afraid of that, you've accepted what you can't change and you're at peace with it. Now, as important as emotional restraint, experience, and awareness are, that's just the tip of the iceberg, because there are many other things you can do to showcase and practice maturity, including patience, humility, respect, and selflessness, all of which I've done separate videos on in the past, which you can definitely check out. So for the time being, I hope that helps. Let me know what you think, and I'll see you in the next video.